I've been explained what a 506C is or 506B from so-called experts 5 or 6 times over the last 2 years. And it wasn't until I met Doug that I really, truly started to understand what it is. So let's welcome Doug from Reg D Resources to explain securities to us.
All right. My name is Doug Ruark. I'm with Regulation D Resources. We are a Denver-based firm that specializes in taking clients through executing Regulation D securities offerings. We also have an application technology that handles all of the compliance aspects of a securities transaction through a web portal. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, I've got about 25 minutes. Really, my goal is to give you a 30,000-foot view of the Reg D programs and really arm you with enough information so that you will be effective in going out and raising capital and really knowing whether or not you should be using a Regulation D offering. So I'm going to cover a lot of things. Again, try and give you some broad knowledge. Be obviously available afterwards for questions, and by all means, you can certainly, call me with any questions that you may have. One of the things that I want to really touch on first is a question that we get asked a lot at our firm, and that is, do I need to do a Regulation D offering? We've really kind of developed a litmus test for that served our clients well over the years, and I'll kind of explain it to you in an example form. If Joe, Ben, and I decided to open a coffee shop, and we all developed the business plan together, we all source a location together, we all form an LLC together, and we all put $50,000 in together to fund it, and then we're all essentially going to be there managing this. We really don't need an offering for that $50,000 investment that's coming in. That's really going to be more of a joint venture type opportunity. It's essentially what I call founder's capital that's going in. The moment that Joe goes to his orthodontist, or I go to my golfing buddy, or Ben goes to his college friend, and we say, hey, we've got a coffee shop, would you guys like to invest? That's really when you're going to need a securities offering. So that is really a good litmus test to apply, because the SEC does not have in its lexicon the phrase friends and family. And that really gets thrown about a lot. We have a lot of people that call our firm, engage us. We actually have a part of our client intake form where we are requesting information on any prior rounds of funding that happened through an entity, and invariably we hear that a lot. Well, we did a friends and family round, and we ended up raising, $500,000. We sold common stock, and gee, we didn't do an offering, we didn't do a filing. That could potentially be a problem then. Again, that's a good litmus test to use. If you are going to put an opportunity together and you're going to be raising money from people that are what I would term as outside investors, you really should be putting an offering in place. The good news is it's not hard to put a Regulation D offering in place. It's not a registration. It really does not require a tremendous amount of money or time. So there really isn't much of an excuse not to go ahead and cover yourself on those compliance aspects. From there, really what I want to discuss now is just kind of a broad overview of the Regulation D programs. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because there's been some recent changes in the Reg D programs that I really want to touch upon. But you've really got 4 main programs under Regulation D. You have 504, which caps at $1 million. And that is subject to state level rules. So you're essentially filing under 504 for your federal cover, but then you're going to be having to comply with whatever the state rules are in the state of residency of the investor. You also have 505. 505 caps at $5 million in a 12-month period of time. 505 actually is sometimes dependent upon state rules and sometimes not. There was they passed ULOE, the Uniform Limited Offering Exemption, and most states have picked that up. Essentially what they then do is treat it like a 506 offering, which I'll discuss in a second. 505s really don't get used that much anymore. You also have 2 506 programs now. You have 506B, which is the traditional original 506 program that has no principal cap. Usually it is accredited investors only, but it does have a carve-out that allows you to raise money from up to 35 non-accredited investors. One of the things that we do see a lot of people miss on this is that the moment you start raising money from non-accredited investors in a 506B, it triggers 2 additional requirements. Number 1, it triggers the need for audited financials. And number 2, it triggers the need for Form 1A level of disclosure. Form 1A is the level of disclosure they use in Regulation A and certain registered type offerings. The audit requirement may not be that big of a deal if it is a brand new startup entity. I can assure you it will be a big deal if you've been operating for a while. All you need to do is call your CPA, hold on tight while he tells you what that audit is going to cost. And that tends to be the problem then, it is a cost-benefit ratio then for the client. Is it worth a $20,000 audit to be able to go out and raise money from 35 non-accredited investors? So really the title of this panel right now is the Regulation D revolution. 506C is that revolution. 506C was mandated under the Jobs Act of 2012. The SEC launched it about 3.5 years ago, and it really is a tremendous program. It follows a lot of the same rules that 506B does. It is an unlimited amount of capital that can be raised in a 12-month period of time. The big difference is you can do general advertising and general solicitation. It does need to be only accredited investors that participate, and they do need to provide verification, which I will cover in a little bit as far as what constitutes proper verification. The big real advantage to that is 506C is giving you a public offering as far as how you're able to promote while still retaining the cost and compliance benefits of a traditional private placement. Ronald Reagan once said that the 9 most terrifying words are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And I really sort of subscribe to that, but I will give kudos where kudos are due. The SEC really kept this program clean. When they passed it under the Jobs Act, most people that are in my position that are practitioners in this business, we all sort of collectively held our breath because we were thinking, okay, the SEC probably wouldn't have done this without Congress mandating it, and so they're probably going to put audit requirements on it and really make it a burden for an issuer to utilize. And they didn't. So kudos to them. They really did take the Reg D programs, which have been around since 1982, which have not really had much in the way of modernization, and they modernized it. The other thing they did is they allow an issuer now to use modern technology. And our company's been operating for 18 years. We operated all the way through the 2000s. We saw the advent of social media. We saw the advent of the internet. And we sat back and thought, wow, all of these great tools to be able to go out and promote an offering and an opportunity and raise money from investors, and you can't use them if you're coming in under Reg D. So that was really the big problem with the programs. And the other issue is that Regulation D is the primary exemption that most small and medium-sized businesses utilize, and it is very frequently utilized by real estate operators. In fact, at our firm, it's 40% of our business, and it's the largest sector by volume that we operate in. So it really was tough. It was unfortunate that the SEC left those restrictions in place as long as they did, because it really did preclude real estate operators especially from being able to go out and effectively raise money for their projects. So that really is what I'm going to primarily try and focus on as far as the revolution aspect is this 506C program and some of the benefits with it. I do want to touch upon some other things though. Like I said, I do want to give you guys a high-level overview of Reg Ds. So I do also want to chat about the offering preparation process. There's really some primary steps in preparing an offering. The first step really is you're going to work through getting the structure in place. Most offerings that we execute are equity-based offerings, and they tend to be for an LLC, and they tend to be manager-managed. About maybe 15 to 20% are debt offerings. It is important to understand that debt securities still need to be sold through an offering. So if you go out and you pool together 5 or 10 investors and they're going to get a real estate secured note, that still needs to be sold through a securities offering. So the SEC does obviously consider that a security. But most of what we really end up doing is equity-based deals. If there is going to be a debt component involved, it tends to be where the client's gone out and they've raised equity to the point where now they can go get an institutional loan. So if the client's buying a hotel and it's a $10 million purchase, they may be bringing, $3 or $4 million in equity to the table, and then they've got Chase or Bank of America or whoever that's providing the loan for the balance. So when we do see debt involved, a lot of times we tend to see it where it's an institutional debt that's coming into the capital stack after the client's gone out and raised equity with the securities offering. One of the secondary then really things, once you've kind of developed your structure, is then the private placement memorandum. And in that regard, that is the primary document that you're using to raise money from investors as far as the disclosure aspect. It is part of our services. One of the things that we do that's a little bit unique, as you can see on the screen, is that we do create something that is a high-end presentation piece. We found that it just helps our clients engage investors more effectively, and it's obviously a better piece to use than your typical Word templated text document that a lot of times people put together. The PPM document really is something that's going to be custom built from the ground up. Every deal's different. Every deal has obviously different risks involved, contractual obligations. So these documents really should be custom built from the ground up. We do draft every single document in our firm to the Form 1A model. And in part, we do that for a couple reasons. Number one, it protects our clients better. Number two, it's the standard that broker-dealers require. So if you are going to go out and you do want to get a broker-dealer on board to assist you in selling your securities, invariably the compliance officers at those firms, they're going to want a Form 1A level spec document as far as the disclosure aspect. You're also going to have subscription documents, and those are the documents essentially that are setting forth the terms of the investment. That is the actual contractual agreement where they're going to be purchasing the securities. If it's an LLC like our sample here, they're purchasing membership units. And from there, once you've got your documentation in place, now really you're looking at doing your filing with the SEC. The filing is a notification filing. It's not an approval process. Technically, it doesn't need to go in until 15 days after your first sale of securities. We actually get the filing in place as our clients execute. We found that it's actually a sales piece, and in fact, we actually link it in and use it as a bit of a sales piece in our portal websites, which I'll describe in a second. That's actually one of the other benefits of 506C is some of the technology you can use to handle a lot of these processes. The filing is a notification filing. It's essentially 4 pages of general information about the offering, the issuer, and then obviously there'll be updates as far as how much capital's been raised, whether or not there's broker-dealers involved. Technically, you're filing an initial version of that within 15 days of the security sale. You're then filing one at the very end. And that really then essentially closes that aspect as far as your interaction with the SEC. There is no ongoing reporting. So that's another nice thing about Reg D is you're not having 10Ks and things like that you're having to file with the SEC after you're complete. Really from there you're ready to execute, and that essentially leads into whether or not you've chosen 506C or whether you're doing a traditional private placement. If you're doing a traditional private placement, you've got to be very careful about how you are interacting with investors. That's one of the things that always used to get people in trouble with the SEC is essentially, you violated general solicitation. You send a mass email out, you put something up on your website, and in that regard, now you've got a problem. So we do still execute traditional private placements. It's funny because I'd like to kind of go back to something that David Thompson said in the earlier panel, which is what you will find is that if you're able to raise money successfully and you treat your investors well, they end up being your best salespeople as far as bringing in new investors. I do it myself. I mean, if I've invested with someone and I've gotten the return I expect and they've got a new opportunity, I'm bringing my buddies in along with me that also do private investing. And I think that's important because a lot of times your first offering can be your most challenging one. But as you execute and assuming you're treating investors well, you will find that they will be your best salespeople. And ultimately, a lot of the 506Bs that we do now are for clients that have done 5 or 10 offerings to us. They've got a couple hundred accredited investors they regularly work with. They don't need to go out and do general advertising. They're cherry picking 25 or 30 people and, they're doing a 506B because they've already got the people picked out. They're already identified. So as far as the execution aspect, again, a lot of it really depends on which program you've chosen. If you've chosen 506C, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want as far as promotion. If it's a traditional private placement, again, you've got to be very careful because you do not want to violate general solicitation guidelines. And that, again, was the problem really with the old programs. I do want to touch upon structure in real estate offerings really just briefly. Again, we tend to do equity offerings. They tend to be for LLCs, and in that regard, then, there's a couple different ways that you can usually structure these deals. It's impossible to cover every structuring dynamic, obviously, in this time frame, but usually what we would tend to see is a Class A, Class B membership unit structure. The Class B units would be what we call manager units. These are units that the manager is going to own. We tend to see a manager entity that is put in place. The advantage of a manager entity is if you're paying in acquisition fees, disposition fees, property management fees, if that's being handled by the manager, it's easier to pay that into one entity rather than having 5 principals involved and now you're trying to take a 3% asset management fee and split it up amongst 5 guys. So the other advantage of that is that carrying forward, if you end up doing deal number 2, deal number 3, if it's an investment fund and you've got fund number 3, fund number 4, you're using that manager entity in those additional funds. You're carrying forward that track record now with that manager entity. As far as that Class A, Class B unit structure, the other advantage with that is that it allows you to carve out certain rights and preferences. Number 1, you could do a preferred return. So you may have a preferred return distribution that you're paying out to your investors before the manager entity ends up participating in net income. Number 2, you can also limit their voting rights. I am very fond of saying that I'm not a fan of orthodontists and attorneys running a real estate project. No offense, but you really do tend to want passive investors, all kidding aside. And you really want the manager, if they have the experience, you want them making the decisions. So it is another advantage of having that 2-class structure is that you can limit what type of voting capabilities they have. Now, a lot of states are going to require certain voting rights be assigned to any member in an LLC, but it's usually going to be for something very major. So your day-to-day stuff would still be, obviously, you'd still be able to 100% control it as a manager. We then, obviously, after payment of the preferred return, would then see a split of additional profit. Now, you really are segmenting out your profit and your net income as far as operating income or income from disposition of the asset. We'll keep it simple. Let's just say it's a multifamily property you've purchased and you are going to buy it, rehab it, reposition it, lease it up, season it, and sell it. So ultimately, when you dispose of that asset, there will trigger an additional secondary distribution schedule wherein usually your investor's obviously going to be first in that distribution schedule to get back any accrued pref return, and then they're also going to be getting a return of their capital. And then from there, any cash balance that's left, profit hopefully, is going to then be split between the investors and the manager. So brief overview on structure. Again, there's different ways to set deals up. A lot of it does depend on the opportunity. Had situations where it's going to be a very quick flip or maybe a development project where there is no pref return, there really isn't maybe going to be operating income, it's in and out, and really all distributions, all profit, everything is getting distributed at the end upon disposition of the asset. So as far as going into 506C and discussing 506C's benefits, number 1, I found that one of the things that one of the groups that I feel really benefit from this is people that are always selling. And it's interesting because there are people out there that are natural salespeople, and there are people that are not. The people that are natural salespeople, you've probably run into them. You're at a cocktail party. Guy comes up. He works for their Mercedes-Benz dealership. Next thing you know, a week later, you're in buying an E55 AMG. An hour later, you're standing in the garage and you're saying, how the hell did this happen? But that's really the mentality that, as far as our clients, that's what I want. When they head to market, I want them to always be selling, because if you have a 506C, everyone is a potential investor, so long as they're accredited. So if you're sitting there in the dentist office and he's trying to sell you teeth whitening while he's filling your cavities, you should be selling him on your multifamily project with that great 7 pref and the accretive upside. So that's something that when our clients go to market, it can be a challenge. Some people just aren't natural salespeople, but I really try and get them to think about this as, everyone's a potential investor. Use the assets that you have. If you have a corporate website and you're getting traffic to that, put something up on the site that is, promoting the offering. If you've got social media contacts, use it. Do press releases. Again, a lot of it is just really trying to get that client to open their mind to all the opportunities that are then available to get exposure for that offering. One of the other things that 506C has really provided genesis for is the deployment of technology for managing these processes, and that would be really compliance portals. At Regulation D Resources, we do have our own compliance portal application. We actually have what I call a B version of this application, which would be for traditional private placements. Usually they get deployed for C offerings. 80% of our work is now C offerings. But the benefit here is, number one, you've got a front end that is built to promote that offering out to the public. And again, you want to be high tech. You want to put a good foot forward. You want to have your A game on when you're dealing with investors. So if you're able to send people to a portal site wherein there's a front end built to engage them, provide them with information on the offering, and really incentivize them to learn more, it's a great way to deal with people. You're not handing out term sheets. In fact, one of the things we have a lot of our clients do is they'll have a set of business cards developed with their portal URL on the back. So now you're at that cocktail party and you've got that Mercedes-Benz guy trying to sell you. You hand him the business card. You've essentially handed him not only the PPM, but you basically handed him a tool to take him through the entire investment process. On the back end, and there are other companies that have portals. Well, obviously, we're not the only one. But most of these portals tend to do similar things. Really, the next part of the portal then is handling your subscription compliance, handling access to the offering documents. These are usually password protected type areas. Ours is. So, we have a prospect level of access where if you want to access the offering documents and learn about the opportunity, you've got to create an account, get approved. The subscription compliance aspect, that is really where now you're going through the subscription process, you're executing all the subscription documents, you're getting your accredited investor verification in place. And that is one of the unique aspects of 506C. Everyone has to be accredited, they have to provide verification. Verification can be a number of different things. It can be a letter from a CPA, it can be a letter from an attorney, it can be a letter from a broker-dealer. There are also third-party services that have, sprung up around this program now to support doing verifications. Finally, they can send you an IRS tax form. We actually have a lot of clients that simply won't accept it because most people don't want to sit and go through some guy's tax return and 8,000 schedules to try and figure out whether or not he's accredited. It's much easier to just have that guy call his CPA or use a third-party service. Most of these services, the one that we use is our default in our portal, $65. They usually have you done in 24 hours. The investor's providing really what they would provide for a credit check. So it's not an invasive process. It is something that when they pass the 506C program, there were people saying, gee, this is going to be a hindrance to subscriptions. We haven't seen that. I think if someone's truly interested in investing in your deal and they're truly accredited, it's not that big of a deal to go get the verification. On the back end then, you've got investor relations. That's one of the things that our portal does is it does provide an investor relations app, allows you to provide access to quarterly and annual reports, financials, the portfolio of real estate assets. And then usually any decent portal is also going to have an admin section that allows you to manage all of the tasks related to the offering, stay on top of counter-executing subscription documents, reviewing verifications. So that's another thing that really, from that standpoint, has changed is the application of technology into managing these processes. And I would say that really, if you want to be successful at raising money, that's what's going to be required these days. People are going to expect that you're high tech. The other thing, too, that has really kind of opened the door is a lot of the crowdfunding type portals. That would be its own separate type of panel. I mean, crowdfunding covers a lot of ground these days. A lot of people refer to 506c as crowdfunding. But ultimately, having a 506c offering in place is going to open the door to get up on a lot of those platforms, meaning these platforms where they have, 100 deals on it, they've got accredited investors coming and looking at deals. For the most part, they're going to require that you have they're definitely going to require you have a securities offering in place. They're usually going to want you to have a 506c or even a Reg A, and then in that regard, then they're able to do general solicitation on that portal. Does anybody have any questions as far as the Reg D programs? Costs? It depends on who you use. As far as the offering preparation, yeah, I mean, through our firm, we have a $6,000 flat fee service, which goes through all the structuring, all the document drafting, the filings, state filing guidance. Portals are extra. We do a discount on our clients for portals. Portals are $3,000 as the build fee, and then there's a monthly access fee of $30. And then
what about the website? Do you build that as well?
Yeah, the front-end website we build, and that's part of the portal. Yep.
So all in around 10,000?
9,000, yeah. Yep.
That could be done in 20 states. So I'm in California using Colorado. You would get all the compliance.
Yeah, 506C, that's a good actually thing to, so 506, both 506 programs, those are federally covered securities. It's a big benefit of 506. At the state level, you're just doing notification. So you can sell it in all 50 states. You're not complying with state rules in that regard. You're just providing those state regulators with notification. And actually, they have a new service now called the EFN service. It's a way for you to actually electronically file on a 506 your filings and make your state filing fees.
In your pricing case, does that include the booklet that you showed?
Yes, it does. Mm-hmm.
There were some rental vacancy trends for like this particular market. Do you do that research, or do you have to have that provided by the syndicator?
It really depends on the client. We deal with some clients that are very well prepared and they're actually bringing a lot of that data. If they're not, we can source it. So we're really just working with the client custom in that regard. A lot of that depends on the client and how motivated and responsive they are. But if it's a motivated, responsive client, on average, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. But I mean, we've had clients on market in 2.5 weeks. To get that, they've got to be really motivated because it's a lot of work to get done, in that time frame. Usually, in that regard, a lot of our clients are doing blind pool type deals where they're raising money prior to going and putting assets under contract. Not always, and we do have clients that show up at our door that say, hey, I got a contract on this property, we got to move in 90 days on it, and we need to be on the street raising money as quickly as possible. Those people we're putting on priority and obviously trying to get them out the door as quickly as we can.
So one other question. So for setting this up, do you interface with the lawyer that sets up the PPM?
We're setting the PPM up, but what we do is we will interface and coordinate with whoever is setting up your operating agreement. So that the one thing we really don't do is corporate formation services, which to include setting up constitution documents. So as far as that goes, some clients don't really need that. They've already got an LLC in place. They already know how to manipulate their operating agreement. Others, they may have an attorney. We actually have partner attorneys that we can refer clients to if they need to get an entity in place. The operating agreement is definitely going to sync with the PPM. I mean, if it's a Class A, Class B structure and we've got certain terms, it's obviously going to be reflected in that operating agreement.
So since any promotion is okay, you do not need a prior existing relationship with the person?
No, that's the best part about it. I mean, and here's the thing. You can do whatever you want as far as promotion. I thought that was one of the great things that the SEC did not do, is try and step in and parse out, oh, well, you could do a radio ad and a TV ad, but you can't do, a print ad or vice versa. As long as you have legend language in your advertising, you're good. And the legend language is kind of what you would see really at the bottom of an ad for a Fidelity Mutual Fund. And again, creativity is king. I mean, we got clients doing radio ads. We've got clients that'll go put advertising into a market that, hey, we're doing a seminar on multifamily investment opportunities in your area. They'll put 40 or 50 people into a Hilton conference room, do a state of the market pitch, start handing out PPMs. So stuff that you never could have done 5, 6 years ago under the old programs. No, the access fee on the portal is there just to cover the hosting and software to run it. It does run on our virtual private server. There are no user access fees. You might have 400 prospects on the front end and 30 investors. You might have half that. You might have double it. We don't charge based on the number of users. Yeah. $147 being. Are you talking about Reg CF?
No, not Reg CF. Rule 147,
Yeah, you're probably talking about like a state-specific type exemption. Yeah, I mean, usually a lot of those would execute under 504. You'd go for 504 at your Fed cover, and then you'd be complying with whatever the state rules are. There are state-level programs that are unique, though. So, I mean, in fact, some of the states have deployed their own crowdfunding programs ahead of what the SEC ended up doing. I'm not necessarily familiar with the 147 one. I don't know if that's specific to a certain state. We specifically just do Reg D work, so we're not really doing the CF stuff, and we really don't deal much with the 504 and state stuff. I mean, we do. We've done 504s before, but most clients now really want to come in and do the 506Cs. All right. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you for